During the last couple of days of slaughter in Syria, the Alawite community was the main target, but we can't forget about the suffering of the Christians in Syria as well. Hi, I'm Hanan Lischinsky. Thank you for joining me again on this All Israel News update, where today we'll look just several hundred kilometers north from here across the border to Syria, where the slaughter that has been going on there in the last couple of days received some media attention, not enough, especially compared to the outsized media attention that Israel often gets. But one aspect that really hasn't been getting the attention it deserves is the suffering of the few remaining Christians who are left in Syria. Now, just to clarify this at the start of this video, it's of course important to mention that the Alawites were the main target of this violence. The Alawite community was mainly impacted by all of this, but we really want to shed some light on the suffering of the Christians as well. And here at All Israel News, we recently spoke to someone who is in direct contact with Christians in the city of Homs. So that is just east of the Syrian coast, where most of the slaughter has been concentrated. And he gave us some insights into the situation of the Christians there in Homs. And of course, we'll also look at the broader implications of the slaughter. And as it appears, you might say once again, the very strict precautions that Israeli leaders took in the last couple of months after Syria was taken over by an Islamist former rebel group appear to have been vindicated completely, basically. So let's just try to quickly recapitulate what happened. We, on allisrael.com, tried to follow the events as they unfolded, so you can check back for more detailed reporting. But basically, since last Thursday, there have been very violent fighting in the coastal areas of Syria. There are two provinces, Latakia and Tartus, which lie along the Mediterranean coast. And they are mainly populated by the Alawite community, a minority in Syria, and the minority to which the Assad family, which dominated the former regime, belonged. So in these areas, according to the reports we have, some 1,500 people died, mostly civilians, over the last couple of days. Again, it's worth mentioning here that there's only one human rights monitor, one war monitor, the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, who provides these kinds of numbers, and we can't really verify, or we don't really have any alternative numbers. And also all of the reports that are coming out are, a large part of them are still unverified. We can't really know exactly what happened, but I'll try to give an overview according to the best of my understanding and the best of what has been written in the last couple of days. So in this area, this Alawite-dominated area, there appear to have been militant groups, militias, left over from the days of the Assad regime that are still being loyal to the Assad regime and are trying to revolt, in some way try to work against the current government. So these groups apparently ambushed some of the government forces, killed dozens, if not hundreds of them. And this is what started this round of atrocities and of massacres. The central government, which again is being dominated by these former Islamist terrorist groups, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham is the most well-known, the largest of them. And this group has transformed itself into Syria's current government and is trying to impose order and is trying to impose its authority on the whole of the country. After these ambushes happened, after these Alawite or Assad loyalist gangs started to ambush and to really escalate this fighting, what happened apparently is that the central government, so President Ahmad al-Shara, gave a call to all of its forces to descend upon the Syrian coast and to quell this uprising. Now, again, what appeared to have happened is both that some of these government forces, which were Islamist terrorists up until several months ago, and by the way, apparently they still are, they followed this call, but also at the time, right now in Syria, there are still dozens of armed, radical, Islamist, jihadi gangs, terror groups, all kinds, who are still not incorporated into the new Syrian government. They followed this call as well. They descended upon the Syrian coast as well. And that is when we saw these massacres happening. We saw horrific footage of some of these Islamist fighters mistreating, humiliating, abusing civilians before just cold-bloodedly murdering them. Again, apparently the numbers that we have are around 1,000 civilians were killed in this, but there are some sources, some reports that we can verify who talk of several thousand civilians. So that's the kind of stuff that we will only find out in the coming days. Now, despite some other reports, it's important for me to note that most of the reports that I saw that appear to be verified or appear to be trustworthy state that the Christians as a group, as a community, were not the target of this kind of violence. The main target were the Alawites, who are suspected, all of whom are like under a general suspicion of still being loyal to the Assad regime. I'm sure that's not completely true. It might be partially true. But in these areas where many of the Alawites live on the coast, there are also Christians living there. And so it appears to me, it seems to me that the reports of Christians being humiliated, abused, and murdered in these areas happened in this context. This doesn't make it better, of course, in any way. But I think it's just important to lay out the facts as we have them and try to get as close to the truth. This was not an anti-Christian pogrom or anything in the way. There are factors, there are groups, countries that are trying to exploit this kind of language and these kind of reports. I don't think they're true, but it's still worth shedding a light on the suffering of the Christians here as well. So as I mentioned at the outset, All Israel News was in contact. We received information from a Christian Arab Israeli who lives here in Israel, who is in direct contact with Christians in Homs. And so he told us about their suffering. It appears that this fighting that centered on the coast also had repercussions in the city of Homs. There are a lot of Alawites who also live in the city of Homs, as well as Christians and several other minorities like Shia and Druze, Kurds. Syria is actually a very diverse society. They have a lot of minorities, a lot of religious splinter sects, and even the Christians are divided between Catholics, between Orthodox of various strands, Protestants, evangelicals, and so forth. So what we heard in the last couple of days is that as this fighting, as the massacres were going on the coast in Homs, the Christians were scared for their life. It appears that some were also either injured or murdered. And as this source said, that the Christians were hiding under furniture, really scared for their lives, as gangs were roaming through the streets, trying to find either Alawites or just any kind of infidel, any kind of peoples that are not Sunni Muslim as they are. However, another important aspect in all of this is to note that the Syrian Christians, have been living in this fear since the takeover of this new regime that is dominated by the Islamist, formerly internationally recognized terrorists of HTS. And while the government has tried to improve its image, has tried to claim that it is moderate, and there appear also to have been attempts in the field to enforce this, attempts to impose order, attempts to prevent the looting of Christian properties, and so on. What is certain is that this new government, whatever its intentions are, doesn't really have control over the whole of Syria yet. So we still have these roaming bandits, gangs, terror groups, all kinds of remnants of the over a decade-long civil war of Syria that are still roaming the countryside. And the Christians, as one of the smaller communities, as one of the communities that isn't armed, that isn't organized, can't really do anything. And Christians, as I said, are scared for their lives. So just as a last point, I want to talk about the Israeli connection to all of this. Israel, on the day, even in the night when the Assad regime fell, immediately sent in its army, immediately instructed the IDF to advance from the Israeli border and seize a buffer zone, the formerly demilitarized zone that was governed by a 40-year-old treaty between Syria and Israel, as well as some other strategic points. The most important and well-known is the peak of Mount Hermon, the highest mountain in Israel, whose peak is in Syrian territory. Apart from that, the Israeli Air Force embarked on a massive wave of airstrikes, something that, even though it had a lot of operations, this operation really stood out. It was around 3 or 4 days of just massive waves of airstrikes that destroyed most of the heavy weaponry of the whole Syrian army. So tanks, artillery, especially advanced radar systems, air defense systems, all of this was destroyed on the ground, exploiting this vacuum that was created by the collapse of the Assad regime. So several points about this. Of course, we can only imagine what would have happened if the new Syrian government would have had all of these weapons, if these weapons would have proliferated throughout Syria after the fall of the Assad regime. The massacres, it's easy to imagine, the massacres would just have been more horrific, more widespread. And this, of course, was heavily criticized by the international community at the time. But we can now say thank God and thank the Israeli leadership for this far-sighted decision. Another thing that has been criticized is the Israeli policy, the public diplomacy offensive against the Syrian government. While many Western countries really rushed to recognize the new Syrian government and to cancel some of the sanctions that were in place, Israel has continued very vocally, very offensively to say that these new guys in charge are just jihadis in suits, as the phrase went over the past couple of days. There are different opinions about this even in Israel. It might not have been necessary to go out in this public kind of way. Whatever the case may be, for now, it seems clear that Israel doesn't have any interest in establishing good relations with the government that continues to not to have any kind of control over its own country and can't even rein in its own forces. The same forces that Israel took all of these precautions against, especially the seizing of the buffer zone, because once these forces get near the Israeli border, no one knows what they might do. So that much is clear. In any case, the situation on Israel's borders, the situation in the broader region remains highly dynamic, highly volatile, even after close to 1.5 years of continuous war and combat across 7 different fronts, as Prime Minister Netanyahu has said. So we'll continue to try to keep you updated. We'll continue to try to provide more analysis and more explanations about what is going on here in this highly complex region. Please leave a like if you like this video. You can subscribe to our channel and visit us on allisrael.com and all the other outlets we have available.